I heard of a certain candidate propounding all his qualifications for office, and suddenly he was heckled. And the man in the audience said, "I wouldn't vote for you if you were St. Peter." Whereupon the candidate replied, "Brother, if I were St. Peter, you wouldn't be in my precinct." Now that's more, or supposed to be more, than just a funny gag. For as a matter of fact, not many of us would vote for St. Peter, though perhaps he's the most representative of all the disciples. We wouldn't vote for him after he had been converted, for we wouldn't be in his precinct. One of the most astounding things to me is the cultivated ignorance of the major facts of the Bible. There are 4 steps in solving a problem. First, see it. Second, state it. Third, study it. Fourth, solve it. And of all 4 steps, far and away the most difficult is the first one, getting people to see it. Just to see what it's all about. For we are such experts in selective seeing, that is, only looking at the things that please us and developing blind spots to the areas that bother and disturb us. One of the difficulties is that we look on Peter and see only certain aspects of his character and ignore certain other ones. Now, you got to see all of Peter to see what the problem involves. That is, to get in his precinct. Peter did what you and I do. Followed the Master more or less remotely for quite some time, as about 3 years, as a matter of fact. And he never got the big idea. He never could see what it was crucially all about. But Jesus, with that characteristic patience of his, didn't kick him out and say, "If you aren't going to see what I'm driving at, you're just stupid." He didn't say that any more than we should. He just kept praying and praying and praying for him. And toward the end of his ministry, when the time was getting awful short for him eventually to see what it was all about, Peter, I mean, Jesus made an astounding statement. I want to read this statement to you. Jesus said, "Simon, Simon," now when he repeats a fellow's name like that, he means it. That is, he's talking to the brother directly. "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted," Jesus is talking to Peter after Peter's been his follower for 3 years. And he says, "And when thou art converted, strengthen the brethren." And he said unto him, Peter that is, said unto him, "Lord, I am ready now to go with thee both into prison and to death." And Jesus said, "I tell thee, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day even, before thou hast thrice denied me, thrice denied that thou knowest me even." Now, immediately after that incident, where Peter, in the knowledge that he possessed as to what it was all about, made the noblest declaration that he was capable of making, immediately after that incident, Jesus was subjected to that ordeal of denial by one who implemented it with more diabolical deliberateness, one Judas. And then it was that Peter tried to make good on his vow in the only way that he knew how to make good, and the only way that we know how to make good. When you say you're going to defend a man, even to the point of going to prison with him or dying with him, what do you really mean by that? You mean that you'll sock the first man that tries to hurt him, now, don't you? Is there any other way of defending a man but walking up and smashing him if he tries to hurt you? Do you know of any other way? You do by report, but not by experience. You have heard that there is another way, but it just won't work. If you mean if you're going to protect a man, you've got to walk up and sock him sock the person that assails the man you're trying to defend, of course. Well, anyhow, whether you recognize that or not, that's all Peter could see. And after 3 years of listening to the talk of Jesus, all about this business of turning the other cheek, all about giving love in return for hate, all about business of going 2 miles, all about this business of forgiving your enemies and all that and loving them, heard that chatter for 3 years, he was realistic enough and down-to-earth enough and practical enough and red-blooded enough to recognize the rhetorical quality of all this talk of Jesus, that he was essentially an Oriental poet, that he did have these magnificent flights into the realm of utter utopianism, but of course and the wonderful compliment that Jesus was undoubtedly interpreted as giving Peter was that Peter, knew that Jesus knew that Peter, wouldn't do what Jesus said he should do. He knew that there was this rapport, this understanding between them. And so, when he had made this vow, Master, I'll stand by you no matter what you do, or what they try to do to you, he meant it. And the first opportunity, which was directly after this avowal, when the first opportunity came to demonstrate that he meant it, he did it. For just then they came up. And while Jesus yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and drew unto Jesus to kiss him. And Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? And when Peter saw what was transpiring, he, having a sword, Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Peter, put up that sword into the sheath. They that take the sword shall perish by the sword. And then what happened? Then they took Jesus and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall and were set down together, Peter sat down among them. But a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire, and earnestly looked at him, and said, this man was also with Jesus. And he, Peter, denied, saying, Woman, I know him not. And after a little while another saw him and said, thou art also one of them. And Peter said, man, I am not. And about the space of 1 hour after, another confidently affirmed, saying, of a truth this fellow was also with him, for he's a Galilean. And Peter said unto him, man, I know not what thou sayest. And immediately the cock crew. And the Lord turned and looked on Peter. And Peter remembered. The day of remembrance is a terrific day. When remembering words that have been articulated in your hearing over and over again, you suddenly become aware of what they mean. That's an hour called the hour of conversion. And from then on, you never heard a word, you never hear a word about Peter using any sword. You don't ever hear him even pointing to it or referring to it. From then on, you hear Peter strengthening the brethren, and how he strengthened. Listen now. Here's Peter. Last epistle, first epistle. And I assume he wrote it. I know some of the scholars say they don't know who wrote it, but this is what we call inherent evidence. Listen to Peter now. When he sees exactly what kind of a jam he and all his followers are going to be in. You see, it wasn't a matter of academic discussion as to what would one do were one actually threatened with invasion of a tyrant who would be a dictator and would probably deprive you of your freedom. What would you do and how would you act under the circumstances? It wasn't any matter like that. It was the fait accompli. It had all been done. It was no longer a theory. They were completely tyrannized over by the world's worst dictator, whose successive names came to stand for the last word in barbaric cruelty to any deviationist. Caesar! Caesar! And that name had the ring of such diabolical disciplining as to put terror in the hearts of all. Now, this Jesus had come, quite obviously, with the express purpose of meeting the immediate emergency. For the most awful sin that I know of, I suppose, is that which we call the sin of irreverence. Deeply understood, it's the ultimate blasphemy. But there's a sin that is almost too universally committed and with too much sanction, so that I would say that the sin of irrelevance is almost as heinous as the sin of irreverence. And you may be dead sure that the major ethical demand that is put upon any sincere individual is to talk about the main point, if you've got any ethical guidance to give, and not to indulge in this vicious practice that has become so popular, which actually does produce the popular preacher, to be truthful, I must admit it. The really popular preacher is the one who talks about the sins we have no mind to, so that we shall not have to think about the sins we're inclined to. But that's the sin of irrelevance. And this is my major contention. There was only one superlatively important matter confronting Jesus and his generation, and the significance of Jesus having come to earth as in the fullness of time, as we say, was that he was there confronted with this conjunction of historical events that created the vilest possible dilemma for an ethically sensitive person to face. Here it was. Rome had conquered the world. Rome, the vilest of tyrants. Rome was there in her ultimate evidence of superior power, dominating this dinky little area in a remote section of the empire. And Rome was demonstrating her power, and in ways that were tremendous. This is very important that you should know the kind of a world into which Jesus came. It irks me in no end to hear the drivel that is taught by most of our Sunday schools. Matter of fact, for the first time in my life, after 30 years in the ministry, I now have a sense of intellectual self-respect when I talk about my church school. First time. The stuff that we dish out to these youngsters is just too pathetic for words. A lot of irrelevancies that are cute, kind of, but they don't bear on the major matter. We don't even give them the material. For example, do you know the major thing that happened in the life of Jesus as a youngster? The major thing that happened in the life of Jesus was this, and nothing compared with it. He was about 12 years old, living there in Nazareth. Judas the Galilean, the hero of the hour. And this name, Judas, you know, was the most patriotic name he could give any boy. You know what Judas means? Judas means praise. When a mother had a boy born to her, then when she was deeply devout and wanted really to dedicate her child, she called him Judas, praise. And Judas was the name of the national heroes, the contemporary heroes, as well as the former heroes of the Jews. Judas the Maccabean was the one that brought 100 years of independence to the Jews, a longer era than they'd ever known in their history before. And Jesus had two Judases in his disciples, Judas Iscariot and Judas not Iscariot. And at the age when he was most sensitive and responsive and malleable, morally and every other way, what happened? Judas the Galilean, the leader of the Zealots, planned to implement their thesis, namely, the only way you get rid of these barbarians is to throw them out on the rear and do it by violence. There isn't any other way. You can't persuade them. You got to kill them. And therefore, that's all that matters now. Let's get them out. So they planned this insurrection, and with scrupulous care. But the espionage system of the Romans was as good as it is in our own country, and that's pretty good. And therefore, they found out about this thing and anticipated the insurrection and queered it in most of the major cities. But in the second largest city in all Palestine, a city that you probably never heard of, but was the second most important city in all Palestine when Jesus was a boy, namely the city of Sepphoris, Sepphoris. When that city revolted, because Judas the Galilean was there in person, that revolt was carried to a successful termination, and they did throw out that garrison there, and they did hold it, and then Rome gathered her hordes together, and with a deliberateness that was definitely cruel in its procedure, by the very slowness and certainty of what they were going to do, just retaining their impetuosity, restraining their impetuosity by sort of with a sadistic joy in anticipating what they were going to do. Then they surrounded Sepphoris and starved them out, and then walked in and took every one of the inhabitants of that city and made them tear their houses and buildings to pieces. Not one row or stone left upon another. And when, just a few years ago, my sweetheart and I were in Nazareth, we looked down the valley and over to this high spot on which Sepphoris used to be. And we walked the 4.5 miles down that valley up to this place where Sepphoris was. It's just 4.5 miles away. Just the distance I live away from my church, by the way. A nice perspective, you get that distance. And therefore, we walked over there and beheld what remained of Sepphoris. And there the stones were still crumbling, not a single building on the spot, just 3 Bedouin tents, all we could find. Absolutely extirpated, eradicated, razed, that city was, and never built up again. But having done that, the Romans said, now we'll sell these women and children into slavery, and we'll kill off the old men just because they're in the way. And then they took the 2,000 finest young representatives of the Jewish race, the bravest that had, these young zealots, took them and with hellish care placed them upon 2,000 crosses, reaching all the way from Sepphoris to Jerusalem, as the most superb demonstration of what happens to you, bud, if you flirt with Rome's dictates or try to violate them. And Jesus, how old are you, son? How old are you? How old are you? You, don't you know how old? Huh? 8. Well, just 4 years older than that boy there. And to see this youngster, he's quite interested in what I'm saying, no matter what's happening the rest of you. This youngster, just 4 years older than this boy sitting right here before me, saw these 2,000 men writhing on these crosses and screaming in their torture, because the cross is the most diabolical technique for inflicting torture that we know anything about, much worse than anything Hitler had ever devised. For you seem to be ignorant of the fact that the crucial anguish comes from the fact that they nail their hands and the feet not to bear the weight of the body or to pull their hands out immediately. The crucial fact that is so generally ignored is that they place the body upon a huge spike at the crotch of the body and are careful to see that the genitals themselves are placed in such a position that you are superbly, perpetually tortured. There you are in this living death, and men have been known to live for 8 and 9 days and starve to death. There isn't any form of torture comparable to that. And that's the thing that this youngster at 12 years of age witnessed, the finest heroes of his race. Do you mean to tell me that you think any other issue mattered? Is there any other thing that anybody that was concerned for his people could talk about but that? Namely, what do you do with these Romans? What do you do with them? If you haven't got some answer, then you are hopelessly out of step with the world, and you don't deserve to be living much longer. Now, every little group had its answer, and those answers were very specific and very succinct and very definite, and they were labeled, and their political implications had such complete affiliation with their religious ideals that they were one. Jews didn't know anything about divorcing their politics from the religion the way Republicans and Democrats do. They meant that their republicanism or their democracy or their democratic principles had to be the expression of their religion. We have ours pretty well divorced so that we can vote for whomever we please and still not feel much guilty conscience. But in any event, what actually happened then was that when Jesus was coming into his young manhood, he was besieged by these groups, besieged by them, and they said, listen, join us, come on, be with us, you've got lots of problems, be with our gang. And the major significance of the temptations that Jesus tells about is nothing other than a dramatization of his whole intellectual anguish as to what to do in making the crucial contribution of his life. So here were the Essenes, and they had a little group up there around the Sea of Galilee, and they were screaming, come on, be with us. We have nothing to do with these barbarians. We are simply refusing to have any intercourse with them at all. And therefore, Some people thought that he would be a Essene because they were very ethically sensitive and they were very anxious to live according to their ideals with scrupulous obedience. Then there were the apocalyptists, and they said, well, everything is going to hell anyhow. You might as well come with us and be one of the chosen. And one of the interesting things about the chosen people is they always choose themselves. And therefore the apocalyptists, knowing that the world was coming to an end somehow, finally said that, well, we'll be the chosen ones. If you believe the way we do, so join us. And the more the world was going to the dogs, even as it is with some of our dear friends today, the more happy they are because they see that's the end of the world and God's going to come here and pick out the brands from the burning and carry the smoking things away. But in any event, what actually was happening there was a sense of the urgency and immediacy of the crisis. So there was something to their appeal, but then there were the smart boys, the down-to-earth practical brethren that know the way the world works, and they are really realistic. If there's one thing they are, it's realistic, by which they mean we compromise whenever it's most comfortable. And therefore, we don't have our ethical ideals bothering us unduly, or if we do, we have some very smart individual who can explain the irrationality of the irrational position you've already taken. Therefore, you can, with perfect impunity, do anything you blame please, provided you want to do it enough. So, these were the boys called the Sadducees. These were the original quislings of the day. These were the boys who were down to earth. They said, after all, look at us. We're caught here in a terrible snare, aren't we? These Romans have got us by the neck, haven't they? What can you do about it? You saw what those zealots tried to do. And what did it get them? Nothing but death. Now, the thing to do is to make the best of a bad mess. And therefore, go along with these Romans, not altogether, but as much as you can, so that, and as a matter of fact, if you do, you'll make quite a killing yourself. You see, what you'll do is to be able to represent them, the Romans, and you can collect the taxes and take your own rake off, and you can get all the ecclesiastical positions that have prestige and power, and really it's not, and so forth. And therefore, what happened was that the Sadducees were these oily quislings who had no conscience at all, save that could be manipulated by their rationalizations, you see. Then there were the best group of all of them, I think. I mean, certainly the most sincere and most intelligent and most honest, and the best people in the group, and they were the Pharisees. And they had a doctrine, and they said, of course there isn't anything you can do about it, and you've got to depend entirely on God, just entirely on God. But it isn't a matter of God just picking the time arbitrarily and saying he'll come down. No, sir, it's a matter of what we do about it. Now, if every Jew will obey every law of God for one day, that was one of their sayings, if you'll just obey it for one day, then God will come. We will have proved ourselves worthy to be the recipients of his concern and his care. But if you won't do it, if some Jew keeps breaking the law, of course he won't come. That's what made them so fanatically zealous about insisting upon everybody observing the law. And when Jesus came along and didn't do it, when he broke it for the sake of a human being, after all, what's a human being if you're waiting for the whole kingdom of God to come? And when he began plucking corn on the set, that just irked them no end. And therefore they were the most difficult to handle because they were the most sincere and stupid. There isn't anything worse in the world than a sincere, stupid person. I get so irked about people saying, well, I don't care what you say, I'm sincere. Well, I'd like to say, well, a little intelligence wouldn't hurt so much if you just... We had a very sincere gal up in our town, young woman. I mean, very pious, too. I mean, with her sincerity and piety, that's a combination hard to break into. And therefore, she was well armed against any intellectual invasion. And the result was that one night she was nursing here in the ward, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, light, terrible, just darkness going all around, just a little light on her table. And all of a sudden, this wild, maniacal scream from one of the patients, and it just petrified her for a moment. Then she came to and realized what was happening, grabbed the bottle and ran to him and administered this dose. And then something uncanny about it, as she subsequently said, I ran back and put the bottle under the light, and to my utter horror, I'd given him poison. She screamed fanatically. She ran wildly. She got the interns. They pumped out of all that. But, you know, when you give them poison, they have a way of dying. No matter how sincere you are, and no matter how piously you pray, they just go ahead and die. Now, I love sincere people, and I don't like insincerity. I love insincere people, too. I mean, I love everybody, but I just don't like insincerity, but I wish we could just realize that sincerity, to be decent, must be intelligent. And that sincere people can do more damage to the cause of anything than the other people, because you trust them, you love them, you see. Well, that's the Pharisees. Then lastly, there were the Zealots. These were the boys who said there's only one answer, and that's to smash them with might. You meet might with might, and you fight fire with fire, and you can't hope to stop this evil without your being willing to perpetrate the evil on them and give them a dose of their own medicine. And that's been the 100% idea ever since. All it was before. As a matter of fact, this is the prized delusion, beloved. Once I'm going to tell you this story, I don't know how to fit this in quite here, but it's getting a little tense, so I think I'll tell it anyhow. I want to ease up the pressure here. Not much, but enough so you can be resting a while. There's just one idea at the core of all this that we're trying somehow to pillory and reveal and show. My contention that this whole drastic dilemma in which we find ourselves revolves around this single idea. Now, this isn't an oversimplification, but it's the quintessence of the whole problem, I think. Well, once upon a time, there was a fellow named William Jennings Bryan. You remember him? And the bald dome and a little fringe around here. Nice fringe. He had a way of scratching this fringe whenever he got to studying or thinking or reading, which wasn't often enough to wear it out. But anyway, he used to scratch it while he was reading. And one time he was riding along in a train out west here and sitting in one of these double seats, and he was reading away. And a cowpuncher came in and got in the train and sat out right opposite him. He watched this brother Brian scratch away there, read away, and finally couldn't stand it any longer. And he leaned over and he tapped him on the knee and he said, I tell you, partner, if you just chase that little devil up into the clear, maybe you can catch him and kill him. Well, now, that's what I propose to do. I'm doing a lot of scratching here, but I'm trying to get this little devil up into the clear where we can catch him and kill him. Now, the main significance, I say, of the Master, and I say this with great reverence, the main significance of the Master's whole revelation was to tell the world there is another technique. And the major interpretation that we must give to these temptations that he himself told about, we only got it from him, was his wrestling with the appeals of these terrific, the importunate parties. Why don't you turn the stones into bread? Now, I heard a preacher preach a sermon on that, and it gave me a large pain. Because he reduced the whole thing to Jesus wrestling with himself over the sex problem. Why don't you gratify your physical appetite at the expense of a spiritual ideal, I heard him say. I can take lots of stuff from preachers. I've taken a lot from myself, and there's nothing beyond that. But in any event, that stomached me. Because, you see, a man is known by the dilemmas he keeps. Tell me what your major dilemmas are, and I'll tell you how adult you are. And if at 33 you're still wrestling with the sex problem, brother, you're in a case of arrested development. That's all right for adolescents. That's all right for youngsters. But when you get to be 33 and you're a man, well, at least you ought to have had the answer for that one. Or else you're hopelessly belated. And Jesus was certainly not concerned with that problem. At that age, he was too much of a man. What was he wrestling with? He was wrestling with a cosmic problem. And that cosmic problem is the way by magic, is the way by using superior spiritual power to dazzle and detract and overwhelm. Is it the way of the charlatan? Is it the way of the trickster? Is it the way? And he repudiated. Get thee behind me, Satan. Then came your whole dramatic demonstration. Likewise, throw yourself down from the temple. And then came, that likewise was their apocalyptist's appeal, you see. And then the last major one was the Sadducees. Come on, says the devil, I'll give you half the world if you'll bow down and worship me. And there was Jesus caught in this terrific dilemma. And finally he emerged. And notice how he wrestled with it. And he began, first of all, demonstrating it, not talking about it, acting in terms of it. And then he began expressing it and trying to make it clear. And they just didn't get it. The disciples didn't get it. Here they were carting around their swords all the time. Why? Well, after all. And Jesus had to wait till the very end of the ministry before he could even convert his own disciples. No wonder he's having such a job with most church members. I mean, our power of resistance is terrific. And emasculating the gospel until it's something that we can comfort ourselves and make it a casual issue of church going or not church going, but never anything that vitally takes hold of the very inner being of you, where you're transformed and empowered and ready to do something about the major issue. So when we have a world like this, what's the matter with the church? Hasn't got a thing to say. It's impotent for the most part, except saying, oh, for goodness sake, trust God, trust God. Jesus says, but there's a way, and there's the truth, and this is the life, more abundant. And then he dramatizes it with such complete skill that the wayfaring man, though a college graduate, doesn't have to err therein, unless he's so persistent. I mean, it's the one outstanding thing now, my point is this. Here we are, having had this teaching, in which Jesus goes down to the ultimate, and remember, is in a world where the tyrant is not a theoretical issue. He's on your neck, and he's slapping them around, and he's taking their coats, and he's making them work, and he's putting them on a cross, and he's doing it daily. And he's saying, you obey or else, and nothing behind the curtain is any tougher than the kind of a world Jesus lived in. Remember that. And therefore, what happened? Therefore, he says, I've got another way. And this is what it's all about. And I'm going to risk not only my life, I'm going to do something infinitely worse. I'm going to risk the life of those who put their trust in me. I'm not only going to do that, I'm going to risk the whole cause for which I have come on it. And it's up to my Father to see what happens. I am not going to violate the elemental ethical law which says, whatsoever you sow, that you reap. And if you sow hate and murder and slaughter for whatever reason, no matter what's your noble objective, you're going to get hate and murder and slaughter and now disintegration. And then Jesus said, you see, if I'm not able to risk that, who would be? And the major significance of his whole crucifixion. Why do we have this cross whirling around there? What do you think it means? Is it just a pretty thing for lights on or gold things? It's the crucial thing that Jesus is talking about all his life, and then takes it and transforms it. And you see, they didn't get anywhere with it. They killed his body and released his spirit, And they've been trying to understand it ever since. And meanwhile, this Roman Empire, what happened to it? How come its disintegration? And who are these individuals, the big names of that day? Tell me the name of one of his murderers. Just tell me the name of one. You have to make it up if you even pretend to know it. Sunk in the pit of oblivion. And this little group of individuals beating out a new way where they abandoned all these methods that poisoned them and perverted them and kept them in grinders and began this way, and every one of them died as their master, except this Peter who said, this is the tradition. When they came to crucify him, he said, don't do it the way you did my master. I don't deserve it. Crucify me upside down. Now that Peter, having been converted, anticipating what's coming to all these followers, just as it's coming to you, beloved, and to me, wrote some very pertinent words. Terrific. Beloved, says he, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's supper. You see, apparently, that's what we as Christians are supposed to be, partakers of Christ's supper. When his glory shall be revealed, ye will be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part, he is evil spoken of, but on your part, he's glorified. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet, if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf, for the time is come. Now this is though he were writing this for this very date. The time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Wherefore let them that suffer according to the will of Christ commit the keeping of their souls to God in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator. A faithful Creator. That is, if you fulfill the conditions that God himself stipulates through Christ, then you may be willing to bet your life he won't let you down. He is faithful. He's faithful, just as he was with the Master. Now then, what's all this about? This is the spiritual background, the scriptural background, indispensable, I think, to an intelligent interpretation of our modern dilemma. What's the modern dilemma? It's a desperate dilemma, terribly desperate. You see, a dilemma is the confrontation of one by two alternatives, neither of which is acceptable. You don't want to do either one. That's what we mean by saying you're on the horns of a dilemma, and the horn is not a nice thing to sit on. Therefore, neither is comfortable, and you don't want either. Now then, the more terrifying the alternatives, the more desperate the dilemma. Now, what is this desperate dilemma? It's the most terrible thing that I know of in our history. For consider what we're faced with. On the one hand, here are these Russians, and they're on our necks, we say, and they're an inescapable menace. And what are you going to do with them? Well, the one thing that has been tried and that we now completely repudiate, and I don't know anybody that would even dare intimate the feasibility of it even momentarily, is appeasement. You can't appease these boys. To the degree that you appease them, you simply enable them to appropriate more power for a subsequent destruction, and you know that. Therefore, appeasement is out. It's morally reprehensible anyhow. You don't try to buy off a thug. You don't knuckle under, and you don't pay. That's morally bad. Well, then what's the alternative? Well, obviously, there's only one alternative to 98% of the people, I suppose. Only other one alternative. What's that? War! But you see, now, the way you test any man or woman in this modern day as to whether they're fundamentally insane or relatively normal is this. This is the acid test for the hour, I think. Ask them if they think we could have a war and get away with it. If they say, well, I hope to tell you after all, they're nuts. Just plain nuts. That means insane. If they say, well, of course, everybody knows that we can't, well, then there's some intelligence there. For the worst possible sin, the worst possible evil, nothing can be any worse. Nothing. Now let's get that on our heads. Nothing can be worse than a third world war. Nothing. Now, who am I to say that? I'm just an ordinary Methodist preacher. Well, I'll tell you who has a right to say it. The one person, unquestionably one of the 7 greatest minds in the world today, they say, and a man who has gone through these ordeals as none of you know anything about going through it, where he's been threatened and sentenced to death 3 times and has escaped as by a miracle, who's been through revolution and knows it, who knows Russia because he was born in Russia, and who then came to America, out to the University of Minnesota, and there finished his brilliant books that have given him the highest accreditation as the world's leading sociologist, and then invited to the head of the Department of Sociology of Harvard University. And you know that, I mean, there's nothing, that's the last word. Everybody, kind of. That's where I graduated. And when he got there at Harvard, he was given this chair without qualification, and now Brother Lilly and his corporation has just given him $20,000 a year for 6 years to explore these things and to get it over somehow to the people, a dinky little sum. But still good. And by the way, in this month's American, this contemporary issue, this immediate issue, there's an article, the first one about it, a simple statement that's quite like him, in which he just tells the story of how he come to be aware of what really is the important thing. Read that on the Family by Petram A. Sorokin. Now, this is a brand new book just off the press. It's a symposium of 5 major authors. God and the Nations. You can't get it here yet. They haven't got it out here. I tried to find it myself today. But this is the most amazing. There are just 21 pages written by Sorokin on 9 theses on war and peace. It's the most terrific thing I have read anywhere, and the most authentic. Now, I just want to read you this paragraph so you can't sleep tonight. You've been sleeping too much. I saw you tonight, even right here. Therefore, to make up for that, listen to this. In comparison with the Third World War, all other conceivable calamities become lesser evils. Lesser in death, destruction, suffering. Lesser in disastrous vital, mental, moral, and socio-cultural consequences. Regardless of who is the nominal victor, at least 100 million human beings will perish. At least one half of the urban and thickly settled areas will be wantonly ruined, with untold billions of material values destroyed. At least one half of the human population will be deprived of the elementary necessities of life. One half. Disease and epidemics will sweep over the whole planet. Insanity will be rampant, affecting 1 out of every 5 to 10 persons. Demoralization will be superbestial. The complete moral bankruptcy of the earth will be glaring. Not only will the 10 Commandments and the commands of the Sermon on the Mount be forgotten, but even much rougher barbarian moral standards will disappear. All humanity will have to participate in the tragic dilemma either to kill millions of innocent victims in vain or be wantonly killed among millions of guiltless persons. That's the dilemma. Neither children nor women, neither the old nor the sick will be spared. All freedoms will disappear. All governments will become tyrannical and dictatorial. Extreme totalitarianism, mainly in military form, whether it be red or brown or black in color, will be everywhere planted on the planet. Of free enterprise, there will remain practically nothing. All and everything will be regimented and controlled. The highest creativity in all fields will largely cease. The highest forms of human culture will crumble, and most of the best social institutions collapse. Crushed, degenerated, and demoralized, Homo sapiens will return to the caves from which he emerged at the dawn of history and will rove amidst the shambles of his previous civilization and glory. If his creative history is not ended entirely, it will be set back by centuries. Now, this sketch of the consequences of the Third World War is understated rather than exaggerated. Even in this understated form, the war far exceeds any other man-made calamity or evil. For this reason, the Third World War cannot be justified by any value for the sake of which it is being prepared and for which it may be fought. Any such value would be a mere insignificant part of the values lost in the war. Neither can it be justified by the capitalist, communist, or socialist economy, by monarchical or republican, autocratic or democratic political regimes, by religion or atheism, the existing forms of freedom or communist despotism, by prosperity or depression, by high or low standards of living, by alienable or inalienable rights of man, by the creation or destruction of sovereign nations, by the increase or decrease of the territory of this or that group, or by any temporal value whatsoever. Each and several of the values are disproportionately small in comparison with the values that will be destroyed by the war. It will destroy each and all of the positive values. Now, beloved, I say this as dispassionately as I can. Anybody that proposes, directly or indirectly, that we have the ultimate showdown in a Third World War is not only traitorous, but is stark crazy. There isn't anything worse, and for anybody to propose the worst conceivable procedure as the solution of anything else is crazy, paranoid. Therefore, says Mr. Sorokin, the one test of every politician, this is after the vote, so you won't think I'm plugging for anybody. That's the hell of it. But this is the one thing to remember, says Mr. Sorokin, there's just one test. If any of them push us toward war, They must be immediately repudiated if they won't themselves resign. Listen to the way he says this. If, after sufficient efforts to prevent war, the existing governments and ruling groups find themselves incapable of doing so, they should resign and make place for leaders who can do it. In a democracy, it's the citizens' responsibility to recognize and replace such blind guides. This is the best mind we've got. This is the most fully equipped individual. And then the third thing he says, of tremendous importance. We are now victimized by this terrible delusion, namely, that one part of the earth is sick and unholy and altogether evil, and the other part is healthy, sound, and good. And of course, we are good, they are bad. Therefore, the inevitable buildup of a smug self-righteousness and the desecration and defamation of everything in them, so that the Christian virtue of humility is impossible. The more arrogant we become, the more patriotic we are. The more we give them hell, the more likely we are to lose the election. But in any event, what we do find is that you cannot with impunity differentiate and say this part of the nation is well and this part is sick. For we are one sick world. And we are sick on one account. We have been diseased by a dread germ. And for 500 years we have brought our sensate culture so to depend upon this fallacy and so to believe this vile lie that it's inevitable, as Sorokin himself pointed out in 1920, giving virtually precise dates, as it were, with an uncanny accuracy, telling exactly what was going to happen. In his Social and Cultural Dynamics, his classic book, and then again in The Crisis of Our Age, showing exactly what was going to happen, that this utter dependence upon physical naked force to be the arbiter and settler of all the disputes, this, says he, will damn you, the world, I mean. And it's precisely coming to fulfillment. Now, you see, we've come to a stage where war itself fulfills with complete accuracy, complete adequacy, the statement of Jesus, namely, that they that take it perish by it. We are living in the age where it's burst into full flower, and now whoever flirts with that atomic bomb dies with the atomic bomb. And therefore it's not any longer an academic question. And if we continue stupidly to adhere to these old lies that that's the only way you can handle them, and deny the right of Jesus to show us the way and the truth and the life, then we shall walk down the road that goes to the ledge of the crumbling edge that borders the depths of the dam. Once upon a time, there was a man who, on one question, just one, everything else seemed to be perfectly normal, perfectly healthy, perfectly rational. But on one issue, crack. He believed he was a dead man. Well, they said, Jim, what are you talking about? A dead man doesn't. I tell you, I'm a dead man. Well, a dead man doesn't. I tell you, I'm a dead man. Well, how in the world does a dead man go walking? I tell you, I'm a dead man. There's no argument. Finally, they went to his doctor and they said, Bill, you know Jim, yeah? He just thinks you're God's uncle or something. He thinks you're one of them. That's so, yeah. Listen, we've said enough of this stuff, and he bores us to death, this talking about his being a dead man. Now, listen, get him, will you, and tell him to pipe down on that. He's not a dead man. That's silly. Well, I can't do it. Oh, yes, you can. If you say that he isn't, he'll believe. He just thinks, oh, no. Well, yeah, try it. Well, all right. So he went to the boy and said, Jim, you know I like you, don't you? Oh, gee, Doc, and I like you. Well, that's good. You know, Jim, one thing I've always admired about you. What's that, Doc? Well, you're so rational. You're so clear in your thinking. You follow things right through to their conclusion. Well, Doc, as a matter of fact, that's right. That's what I do. I am awful smart that way. You just give me any presuppositions and any logical data, and I'll follow it right through, and you set up your syllogism, and I carry your... That's one thing I do, Doc. Yeah, that's right, Jim. Now, Jim, I want to ask you something. You know, don't you, that a dead man can't bleed. What's that, Doc? Well, don't you know that a dead man can't bleed? Doc, don't you believe I'm a dead man? Now, Jim, I'm just saying, here's a logical proposition. You know that a dead man can't bleed, don't you? Yeah? Yeah, sure, yeah, I certainly do, Doc. Well, now, why is that, Jim? Well, his heart isn't pumping, I guess, and there's nothing to squirt it out or something. I don't know. Yeah, that's it, Jim, that's right. And a dead man can't bleed. Yeah, that... Oh, Doc. Now, Jim, let's get this clear now. A dead man cannot bleed. That's right, Doc. And you're a dead man. That's right, Doc. And, yeah, I know, if I bleed, I'm not a dead man, but I tell you I won't bleed. Okay, just let's have a demonstration. Do you mind? Go ahead, Doc. Just stick a little alcohol rubbed on. Let's put some... By God, corpses do bleed, don't they? Dilemma. Appeasement or war? But war means death. Everybody knows that. Dissolution of civilization. That's right, Doc. Corpses do bleed, don't they? 62 billion next year for preparation. Because, you know, the only way to stop war is to be dead sure that it comes. That ought to be rational. Whatever you prepare for in a world like this, that's what you get. If you prepare for it, you... Maybe. Absolutely. You don't really think, do you, that if you sow onions, you're going to get strawberries, or do you? What you sow, you reap. And if after the present demonstrations, if you still think that we're going to scare Russia into subsidence, well, it looks like she's pushing China into it now. And Indochina's well in it. And Iran and Iraq pretty soon. And Greece and central Germany. And Russia can sit back there and say, I'm not doing anything. I certainly want peace. Let's get another Stockholm peace proposal up. And raise hell. And we'll spread ourselves all over the world, and then somebody will say, listen, we've got to have preventive war, and we've got to sock them before they drain all our energies, and let's go now! And the first offense will be the best defense. And wouldn't it be something for peace-loving America to launch the atomic bomb that wipes up civilization? Wouldn't that be something? You say, what else is there to do? That's what Jesus must have had the disciples say over and over again. What else is there to do? We got to have a couple of swords, haven't we, Jesus? To defend you. So he didn't argue. Just went on and showed them the way. And the crucial test, beloved, now is this. Are we going to take this Jesus seriously enough to believe him? Or are we still like Judas, saying, we know better than Jesus how this ought to be done. We'll put him on the spot, and he'll come out with the 12 legions of angels we got up there. He'll suck them all and build up his kingdom. And shall we then crucify the Son of God afresh and put him to an open shame? There is a third alternative. And that's repudiation of this incredibly stupid delusion that the final arbiter is naked physical violence. As Sorokin said, on a little tree near Archangel, where I was about to be killed, I thought. I'd been sentenced to death. I found a statement carved in the tree. Love is the only creative force. I know it's there. I carved it. And then, as he tells in his story, the miracle of his being saved, first against the czars, then against the commies, always derived from the simple fact that he had done a kindness to somebody, that he had loved them, always. Now he's exploring the possibility of redeeming a world by risking everything on loving your enemies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crane, for this wonderful message. Now, how many minutes do you have left, Dr. Crane? Dr. Crane has to catch a train, and he has about 5 minutes. But,
Where's A.J.? Did he go?
No, A.J. is still, where's A.J.? Right here he is. Will you come up here, please, too? So if you have any questions to shoot at either one of these men, and Dr. Crane will have to leave and probably take a little more with Rusty here. Shoot your questions right now at Dr. Crane first, because he has to leave.
It's in Eusebius, originally the historical documentation of it, but now it's finally getting into the literature. For instance, I saw it in a church school paper just about 3 months ago. It was, I pray it was in a Methodist one, but I'm not dead sure. But you can find it in Kirby Page's books, too. The original documentation is in Eusebius, however.
I'm thinking of the little book, For the Understanding of Jesus by Sympathy.
Yes, I guess that's in there too, yes, that's right.
I'd like to ask Dr. Crane what he may know and how he would evaluate an article that recently appeared in the 50th Century by Warren Marshall Parker on a shift in the thinking of even the military leaders in the use of certain forms of violence. He pointed out the abstinence from the use of poison gas during World War I. And
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that all military leaders recognize, all the intelligent ones recognize the disastrous consequences of initiating any atomic war. They would be the most reluctant in the world to do it. It's just a matter of our getting to the point of sheer desperation where one or the other does it. That's the point. Yes, there's no question about it. I think that the characteristic of our times is the frank avowal of the disastrous nature of war by the militarists. For instance, here is Ike Eisenhower at the Boston University commencement. I never get over that. Boston University and President Daniel Marsh, our good Methodist labor leader, president of the university, was conferring on him this degree, And then he asked Ike to give him, General Eisenhower, to give him this, to make a speech. And so General Eisenhower said, "This is a strangely ironical situation, that you should be decorating me with with an award of academic proficiency and all." He said, and turning to Dan Marsh, he says, "Don't you know that it is your business to put me out of business as a soldier?" They do. But I say the tragedy of our times is the complete absorption, that is, the complete domination of our thinking by this delusion. The one thing that I think is most imperative of all is what I've been trying to say all evening is somehow to get a wedge in there to pry loose this lie. For instinctively, why shouldn't we? Just as we believe for centuries and centuries the obvious fact that the sun goes around the earth. And when anybody would dare say, "But it doesn't," kill him. That's heresy. Just as we believe for centuries and centuries that the earth was flat. Well, now, finally along comes a Galileo and a Copernicus and all, and they begin saying, "But it isn't so, it isn't so, it isn't so." And that was the opening wedge that gave us a new world and opened up all these possibilities. Now, that's exactly the thing that Jesus is doing. You believe this lie, that physical violence settles things. It's so obvious that it does, but it's a lie. Now, don't believe it. I'm giving you the truth. This is the way. You love people, you die for them, but you don't kill them. You surrender all for their sakes, and you conquer them. That's what we mean by what on earth can we believe when we say, "Do you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ?" Some emotional spasm that automatically gets us saved from some future hell? Doesn't make sense, not in a world like this. To believe in the Lord Jesus Christ practically means, do you believe he was telling you the truth and that his way is the way, or don't you? That's what we mean by believing in what that will save us. You see? So if we once can get this vile lie just a little out of the mind, and people begin questioning it, as they are beginning to, this is the most hopeful sign there is, then we will have some possibility. But so long as we just cultivate it and say, no, still your bigger armaments, this is the only way to save ourselves, this is the way, and it looks so obvious, just like little Johnny sitting over here, and Papa comes along and says, "Johnny, sit over there." "I don't want it." "Johnny, sit over there." So big Papa takes little Johnny and plants him over there. Now, the terrible thing about that is that Papa believes that Johnny's sitting over there. See what I mean? He actually believes that Johnny's sitting over there, and Johnny isn't over there at all. Just his body's over there. And as soon as Papa lifts up, Johnny pops right back where he's been all the time. He calls his body back there. But Papa thinks that if he can push the body around, he's pushed Johnny around. And he hasn't at all. That's exactly the thing we're all doing. So we show Russia, and she gives away here, "You see?" And we push him out of Korea, "You see?" You haven't done anything. Not a thing. You pushed some bodies out and slaughtered some others, but you needn't think you're ever going to conquer anybody that way. You just multiply the belief in the philosophy, and we're damned with it as they're damned with it. And that's why it's universal chaos. See, so the one major challenge is, do you believe this lie, or can you get free from it? That's the initial thing, and that's what I think Jesus meant preeminently about this business. I'm the way, the truth, the life. Well, it's wonderful to have been with you, and thank you so much, and I love you, everyone, and I hope you have a nice evening, a peaceful sleep.